And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. You had a nice beginning of the week and all that. Welcome back for another interview on the channel. Tonight we are going, after a great interview last week with Commissioner Vestager, we are back in the European Parliament because our guest tonight is a member of the European Parliament, Juan Fernando Lopez Aguilar, who is from the Socialist and Democrats group, so on the left side of EU politics. So Juan Lopez Aguilar has been a Spanish MEP since 2009, so it's his third mandate, and he is currently the chair of the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, or LIBE as we call it in the European Parliament, and he's also a substitute in the Committee on Development and in the Committee on Constitutional Affairs. The LIBE committee is like one of the biggest, most intense committee that focuses on law in the European Parliament, so we will discuss a bit about that. And most recently, he worked a lot as one of the rapporteurs on the asylum and migration package, which is the one of the big initiative of the EU and DC Commission to modernize the EU migration policy, taking into account the migration crisis almost 10 years ago. But before we start the interview, as usual, I do a short reminder of the rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will stay with us for 1 hour. After that, he will go or enjoy the rest of his evening if he's lucky. You will be stuck with me for 30 to 45 minutes to debrief the interview, to discuss your impressions, answer additional questions, give context, and just chat. It's let's say an open mic from that point. As usual, I've prepared my question for our guests, but of course you have the chat. You can use it to react and suggest your questions. Bearing in mind that, of course, stay on topic. We're here to talk about the EU, so talk about the EU, don't talk about national politics. Talk about things that, of course, are relevant to the topics of our guest. And as usual, do that while staying civil and without spamming. And yeah, apart from that, I think we covered the basics, so I suggest that we dive right in. Good evening, Juan Lopez Aguilar. Thank you very much for being with us tonight to answer our questions. So you heard me doing a quick introduction and introduce you. Is there anything about you that you would like to add to what I said before we start?
No, it's okay. It's my pleasure to be on live, to be live with you all tonight and be of some service, be of some use by explaining the complexity, the scale, the magnitude of the European lawmaking process, which is certainly unique besides sophisticated. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of time, devotion, and commitment. And certainly I would like to reassure you that that is my case. I am deeply committed to European affairs, and particularly to the field of action of the committee I have the honor to chair some years now. The Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, dealing with fundamental rights, liberties in the first place, all the way to security matters through justice and home. My pleasure.
Well, lots of things to discuss. I mean, LIBE is a very intense committee, as we say. Because of this intensity, LIBE has a bit the reputation of being one of the most difficult and conflictual committee in the European Parliament. Like, is that a reputation that you agree with, or you think it's not that bad actually to work in the LIBE committee?
I do agree. Actually, I live it from within, round the clock, 7/24. That is the case. First of all, the LIBE committee is the #1 legislative committee in the House. The thing is that the European Parliament is unique in itself precisely because it's the only directly elected, legitimized by the universal suffrage of 430 million European citizens, supranational in its scale, and lawmaking in its function, lawmaking in its competence. It's actually the only directly elected, supranational, legislative body in the world. We do make laws in the European Parliament, and the committee I chair is the #1 legislative committee. Not all the committees in the House are lawmaking committees. Some of them are highly profiled as international affairs, foreign affairs, or petitions committee. But they are not lawmaking committees. The LIBE committee is the #1 when it comes to lawmaking. At least 23% of the overall landscape of legislative procedures, of the whole delivery of legislative procedures, go through the committee I chair. And besides, precisely because its substance, because of the field of action, dealing with fundamental rights, including data protection, which is the highest standard in the world, the Libre Committee is a magnet, attracting many combatant, pugnacious profiles and personalities in the House. So yes, the Libre Committee is itself very competitive, very pugnacious. It shows when it comes to conflict of competences with other committees, but it only shows when it comes to plenary debates. There are always hot debates, precisely because of the issues involved, including the fundamental rights, democracy, and rule of law framework, which certainly is delicate and worth arguing about.
And in that context, like given that Libe is very intense, like what is the most difficult file that you and your committee had to deal with? Like the number one most difficult file that you ever had to deal with since you're in the parliament in Libe?
Certainly, migration and asylum, for good reason. Migration and asylum are by far the most divisive and polarizing issue in the European agenda, some years now. There are many grounds for it. First of all, migration is a fact, asylum is a right, and yet they are put together all too often. You see that even in the wording of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union, they appear together. Asylum is on the legal basis when it comes to policy and lawmaking of Article 78 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union, and migration comes after. Legal basis, Article 78, there is a mandate to put in place a common European asylum system and a common European migration system, consisting of policy and laws. And they're different, but both are divisive. They are divisive geographically, not the same. They look towards migration and asylum when you're a Baltic than when you're a Southern European, namely a Canarian. I am a Canarian myself. I was born in the Canary Islands. I represent the constituency of Spain in the European Parliament, but I never forget that I come from an island, outermost region, which is close to Africa, and very exposed to the most perilous and the deadliest death toll of the migration routes to the European Union. So for one reason, it's divisive geographically. It's also divisive ideologically. Not the same to be a progressive and to have a progressive approach towards migration than to be in the far right, in denial or in distrust of the migratory routes. And it's not the same politically or electorally, not the same to try to present migration as a fact that we can handle together as long as we do it at a European scale, consistent with our values and with the laws, than first fear-mongering against migrants and then exploiting electorally the fear that you have spread against migrants. So it's divisive, very divisive. And yet we have accomplished overcoming many difficulties throughout the years, but it's shown the Migration and Asylum Pact, the most polarizing, divisive, strenuous, hard-working file I have ever come across.
And as you said, like it's been one of the most difficult files in this mandate, and particularly in Libe. But migration is not a new topic. Since 2015, we've been talking about migration, and there was a first attempt from the Commission, the EU, to deal with this issue, and it failed. So what has changed suddenly for the one of the most difficult, politically speaking, topic to find a resolution and find an agreement, because there was an agreement that was found last December between the EU institution, and it's on its way now to the plenary for in April to be fully validated. So why suddenly the EU, the institution, like managed to find a deal? What is different compared to before?
Precisely, you have made a point. There is a mandate of the treaties to come up with a European common system, both immigration and asylum. And yes, we have tried, but we have failed. Why? Precisely because it's extremely divisive. It's hard work to overcome the differences and the divergences, not only within the European Parliament, but then in the final stage of the legislative procedure with the Council. Because when it comes to the Council in the trilogue, then you face difficulties, because it's also divisive within the Council. And at times, there is no way to set common ground, to find a common denominator. But the thing is that we are coming from a situation that was both untenable and unfair. Untenable because you have seen the balance so far when responding to migratory routes or how to act altogether in the countries of transit and countries of origin, in the so-called external dimension of the European Union. The situation was a patchwork of individual responses, action, reaction, not a system, no systematic response, no architecture at all. And the consequence of not having an architecture is precisely that every individual member state has panicked every time an individual member state has faced stress, let alone say a critical situation. Put it in Lampedusa, Italy. Put it in the Aegean Islands, Greece. Put it in Malta, which is an island state, the smallest in the European Union. Cyprus again. And put it in the Canaries or Ceuta and Melilla. Then the action reaction is panicking, traveling to the country of transit and trying to bargain some kind of a deterrence, some kind of an extraordinary tool to persuade the ruler in place to stop them from sailing to the European Union. That is no European scale of response. That is precisely we have worked real hard this mandate of the European Parliament to finally strike a fair balance between shared responsibility and binding solidarity. And you know what? Article 80 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union mandates the European Union precisely to respond to those pillars, to those two principles. Shared responsibility is not the responsibility only of the country of first entry, the so-called frontline member state, be it Italy, be it Spain, be it Malta, be it Greece. It's not their sole responsibility, should be shared. And then there should be solidarity, not only with the people that have been rescued in the seas after a search and rescue operation, but also solidarity towards migrants with a more positive look, more sensitive to the fundamental and human rights involved. That is precisely the difficulty that we have tried to overcome this mandate of the European Parliament, delivering a new balance between shared responsibility and solidarity.
Like you said, the whole challenge was to find a balance between solidarity between member states, and of course between the so-called frontline members of usually Southern Europe and the others. And we know that between member states it's been a very difficult discussion since 2015 and a migrant crisis. But there's also a political pressure to increase protection of the EU borders, because there's a perception, at least politically, that there is too many migrants, let's say, in the EU, and so there needs to be unified procedure at EU level. So in the end, with the final results you achieved in December, what is this balance looking like?
Well, first of all, we have overcome the so-called Dublin rule, which meant that up to now, the responsibility of attending those in entering, accessing the territory of the European Union, and second, handling their asylum requests or their requests for some sort of international protection of whatever kind, was lying on the shoulders of the country of first entry, and only on the country of first entry. That is why there has been a negative rhetoric about the so-called secondary movements, with the countries of destination of those entries blaming the country of first entry of not having stopped them from moving on in an area of free movement. Precisely that's what Schengen is about. So we have overcome that rule, setting a new migration and asylum regulation by the name of RAM, with more balanced approach to the responsibility of handling. Then we have also put in place some security files which respond to the emphasis that member states make on the security matter, namely Eurodac, identifying by fingerprinting every individual entering the territory of the European Union, and screening by making sure that there is a border procedure. Then we have put in place common rules to handle asylum and international protection requests with a regulation on asylum procedures. And then we have added up a new tool that was not existing so far, non-existent so far, the crisis regulation, precisely to move solidarity in the making whenever it's needed. That is, after search and rescue operation, in a situation of mass influx or sudden arrival, unexpected arrivals to a frontline member state, particularly regions. And that takes solidarity in the making, including relocation programs, which are to be handled by a EU relocation coordinator. This is a new thing. So that is an improvement as to the status quo where we're coming from.
And since we're talking about the perception of all this, there's a first question in the chat, so I will read it. So, seeing the public perception in many member states is increasingly turning against migration, do you think this new asylum package will be enough to address the concern and calm people's concerns and change the public perception around migration, or is it more like an emergency fix? Like there is a current concern, and so we're putting a fix, but not everything is done, and there will need to be more things done in the field of migration to address, let's say, the public perception.
I didn't say it's enough. I didn't say it'll be enough. It'll take a lot of implementation. It'll take a lot of enforcement and hopefully improvement of the status quo that we're setting forth by putting in place a new migration and asylum pact. But having said this, it'll be an improvement as the situation where we're coming from, which I described as untenable and unfair. Untenable because it was a patchwork of action-reaction with no system. And unfair because it lies heavily on the responsibility of the frontline member states, namely Spain, Italy, Malta, Greece, and Cyprus, responding to the pressure, to the hot pressure in the Mediterranean, hosting the so-called hotspots, which means facilities to somehow confine those who have been rescued or entered irregularly, with no complementary response as to the external dimension of the European Union, and with no solidarity in the move. So we are putting in place some improvement. Of course, I have to add that when it comes to making laws at the European scale, you can never be happy with the outcome. That's the rule of the game here. I have convictions. I have values. I am a socialist. I am a Spanish progressist. I am a progressist. I am a progressive Spanish socialist. So it means a lot when it comes to migration and asylum issues. But you know what? I am not here on my own. I am one out of 700 members of parliament, and I belong to a group out of 8. And more than that, I am a progressive, and there is no progressive majority in the European Parliament. Should there be any majority in the European Parliament, would be leaning on conservative rather than progressive. And still, we make compromises across the lines, cross-party compromises, in order to come up with some common denominator so that we can actually deliver. We can adopt laws after a very strenuous, demanding legislative procedure that takes a lot of compromising. But it only makes sense if in the outcome there is something you can rely on, something you can feel proud of, some improvement you can explain to your voters, to your constituents, and that is the case. We have put in place solidarity where there was none. We have put in place a EU solidarity relocation coordinator where there was none. We have put in place mandatory relocation programs in situations of crisis. We have put in place an obligatory solidarity that you can implement through relocations or through investment, financiation of the Internal Solidarity Fund or Migration and Asylum Fund of the European budgeting. That is obligatory solidarity where there was none. And you have put in place some correction to the unfairness of the Dublin rule, which signals that the only country responsible is the country of first entry in a more balanced and fair way. That is an improvement. So I am not entirely happy. Of course I'm not. There is much I didn't obtain through the negotiation, but that's the way we do things here. Nothing gets his or her way. We all have to come to compromises when it comes to making laws in such a scale. A European Parliament of 700 seats of 8 political groups, and then in a final negotiation with 27 ministers of interior of 27 member states with different priorities, with different views, at times opposed views and interests on the same issue, coming to some common ground. That is an extremely hard to achieve goal, and somehow we have delivered and we have achieved it.
And so clearly on this on the fact that you can't have it all because you have to compromise with member state and also within the parliament. For you, when you hear NGOs and experts and academics complain about the result of the negotiation, saying that it's not enough, there is unclarity, etc. It's not good enough for the migrants. For you, they are not being pragmatist. Like they expect things that will not get a majority in the parliament. So that's, and also there is some of your colleagues among the socialist groups who are more critical of the results. For them, it's a lack of pragmatism, this criticism.
My answer is this: their criticism is my criticism. I have heard many NGOs, many human rights activists, many witnesses, relevant testimonies of the tragedies, shipwrecks, death toll of the migratory routes. I have read many surviving testimonies of the routes of exploitation of human beings, the trafficking of human beings and smuggling routes. And you know what? Their cause is my cause. Their criticism is my criticism. But my responsibility as member of a European Parliament is to bring about legislation, is to have legislation adopted. Despite my personal views, despite my ideological stances, despite my political strong points, when it comes to lawmaking, I have to get into it. I have to muddle through, and I have to compromise with others who sees exactly the opposite way, the way I see it, considering that no one has the numbers enough to have a legislation adopted representing his or herself alone. That is the way we do things here. And to the criticism, I tell them, your criticism is my criticism, but believe me, if I am voting yes to this final deal, it's because we are gaining something. We are improving the status quo. Of course, I wished we could have much more. Of course, I am well aware that the prevalent outlook towards migration and asylum is still reluctant or negative. I am a fighter. I want a change of look towards migration. Migration, I said it a million times, is not a threat, not to our security, nor to our identity. And of course, migration is not a conspiracy. It's not that the Africans are conspiring against Europe in order to replace European aging population with new Muslim youngsters, the way the extreme right sees the issue. Of course, I strongly oppose that absolutely paranoid view. There's no truth to that. And of course, I am well aware that there is not a single issue in the European Union in which the divorce between facts and perception is more salient, is more pronounced as it is in this field. There is a gap between facts and perceptions. Facts say that we can handle migrants coming to Europe as long as we do it together, consistent with our values and consistent with our legislation, abiding by the law. We can make it. We don't have to panic if we see that over the year some 100,000 come to Europe irregularly. We don't have to panic. We can handle that. We're a huge global actor. We are 27 member states. We have 430 million people in 27 member states, among them some of the richest in the world, the most prosperous and well-being countries in the world. Why should we panic? We can do it together. And still, I am well aware that the overall perception is that we are somehow menaced. We are somehow at stake because of migration. Yes, I am well aware of the difficulties and even of the contradictions around, but still my main duty as a politically accountable representative of the European citizens is to do my best to get something done.
Find solutions.
By the end of the mandate. Not having anything done, not having anything accomplished, not having any legislation adopted is it any better than having some legislation adopted that makes a difference for the better as to the situation we're coming from? My answer is, of course, it is better to have some improvement than to have nothing achieved. I can simply say, no, this is all unacceptable. I wanted more. I wanted better. So I am not willing to accept. That means, in practice, that the end of this mandate comes to its final point with no delivery at all, with no results, with no improvement, with no legislation, with zero results. Is it acceptable to go to your constituents and voters and say, hey, listen, I tried hard, but I gained nothing. I give you nothing.
So it's a matter of being able to go back to the electors in June and say, yeah, okay, we delivered something. We didn't just argue because it was not exactly the thing I wanted, but yeah, we need to deliver something. Something that you mentioned several times is that, okay, now with this asylum package, there is like a EU framework, a European framework for the EU inside the EU. And you also mentioned several times the external dimension of managing migration. And we know that in 2015, since 2015, there was a rush to make deals with Turkey, with Tunisia, with Libya to try to manage migration, to prevent migrants from coming in the EU in the first place. Now that we have the migration package, what would this external dimension look like in the future? Would we still have negotiations like we have with Turkey, with Tunisia? Would it be like more the framework of Italy and Albania, where they made a deal to externalize the processing of asylum requests? Would it be something else? So what do you see the future of the external aspect of migration?
Again, you're making a very fair point. The situation as for now is that the European Union has been very ineffective in addressing the external dimension of the European Union. The European Union is number one in the world, champion of the world in cooperation for development and humanitarian aid to most of the countries of origin and transit of migratory routes to the European Union. And yet, we are not effective because we do not act together in a systematic way, and we do not translate our financial and budgetary efforts to cooperate with third countries into diplomatic influence. How to bring about change in the countries of transit of origin so that we give hope to the youngsters, to the young generations of those countries of origin and transit, which other way else if that is not the chance, would resort to migratory routes by smuggling or exposing themselves to illicit trafficking of human beings and exploitation of all kinds. We need to create hope and job opportunities and development and institutional capacity by putting in place institutions, rule of law, gender equality, protecting women as men. As we protect men, we protect women on equal rights, on equal foot in the countries of transit of origin. Then we will be somehow reverting the trend that makes out of despair so many on the move towards somewhere else. Most of them are not aiming Europe, but some of them are. In the migratory routes, many do move within Africa, maybe do move to the African Horn, maybe do move to the Persian Gulf, maybe move to the Arabian Peninsula, to Southeast Asia, but some move to Europe. Those we might address properly if we are more influential in the countries of transit or origin. And for that, it takes a European Union that finally grows, that finally matures to be a global actor and behave as such, combining soft power with hard power when needed, so that we can actually be influential in creating the structures and the institutions and the processes that would prevent many from exposing to the risk of smuggling and trafficking of human beings. And the final consideration is that by doing that, we will be improving the status quo that I insist it is both untenable and unfair. Meaning, in the external dimension, that we should not ignore that many who do perish in the attempt of setting foot on the European soil are perfectly aware of what they risk, of what is at stake. In the Canary Islands in 2023, there came 41,000 from the African coast. 41,000 were rescued. But you know what? The estimation, which is very precise because they are dated from the origin, is that 6,000 perished in the attempt. In 2023, 6,000. That is an incredible death toll, tragic, unacceptable. But you know what? Each and every one of those who perished, who went to the bottom of the sea, were perfectly aware, perfectly knowledgeable of what they were risking. So when they went to the bottom of the sea, their thinking was, how can this happen? No, the thinking was, this could happen, but still I had to try. This is happening. I'm dying now. I'm going to the bottom of the sea. And still, I would make it again because I had to try. What is the point I'm making? Is that they're making it because they are in despair, absolutely hopeless. Staying in the country where they belonged was a no-go, was a no choice for each and every one of them. That's what we have to revert by investing better, by acting better, being more effective, diplomatically effective to bring about change in the countries of origin and making the best of all the euros we invest in cooperation in humanitarian days, in humanitarian aid in the countries of origin and transit.
And so you just said, yeah, the 6,000 people who died while trying to do the crossing to the Canary Islands, they knew exactly what they were in for. So are you saying that in the end, like, because I have a question in the chat that is a bit related to that, like, regardless of, even that they know the risk, they know that maybe they're not even eligible to asylum status, they know that they would probably get their request rejected. So no matter what we would do, they would still come. Apart if we improve the situation in their own country so that they're not entitled. So because there are some who say, okay, we should campaign, we should do a communication campaign or do something in the countries of origin to say, yeah, don't try to come to Europe because you will not receive the asylum, you're not eligible, so you will just be rejected and sent back. For you, that's not a solution?
That is not what I'm saying. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have to do better when investing all the euros we invest, which is a lot. We're the number one in the world, we're the champions in the world when it comes to investing in cooperation for development and humanitarian aid. We have to make better sense of it. Institutional capacity, rule of law, protecting women, creating opportunities, countries of origin and countries of transit. And besides, of course, we have to open up, that is an insistent claim of the European Parliament. I have been the advocate for that cause in the European Parliament for years. We have to open up legal and safe pathways to the European Union because the lack of legal and safe pathways is what compels so many to resort to smuggling and illicit trafficking of human beings. Why do they do that? Because there is no other choice. I always insist in that. Why would you pay 7,000 euros to a criminal organization to smuggle you through Europe if you could have paid only a few hundred euros to hop on a plane and make it regular to the European Union with some kind of a humanitarian visa? Because humanitarian visas are counted with the fingers of a hand. There should be more humanitarian visas. There should be more humanitarian corridors. There should be more instruments, legal instruments to hire people from origin by not only by blue card for qualified workers, but also for unqualified workers, not only for posted workers and single permit. No, not only for long-term residents. No, legal pathways means contracting people in origin according to the labor markets of the individual member states of the European Union, but with the European Union policy and lawmaking and coordination. That is making a difference as to the situation we're coming from, which I insist is both untenable and unfair.
But you just mentioned the humanitarian visa, saying, oh, there's not that many people who use the humanitarian visa. Is it because it's too complicated to get to be eligible to this status, or because people do not know that they're around, or it's not accessible? What's the difficulty there?
Because, first of all, we worked real hard from the European Parliament to compel the Commission to come up with a new legal instrument, a piece of legislation, an act, a legislative act, dealing specifically with expanding humanitarian visas. Right now, humanitarian visas are possible according to the Visa Code, Article 25, but they're extremely scarce. And member states are allowed to deny humanitarian visas or to grant them in very extraordinary cases. They should be expanded for all of those who have a legitimate claim to flee from despair, to be granted a legal tool to make it, because otherwise they would be compelled to abandon themselves in the hand of illicit trafficking of human beings, which is so unfair. That is the point we're making. We have to expand the range of legal pathways to the European Union, and humanitarian visas being an outstanding example of an instrument which has been extremely scarce, extremely seldom granted by the member states so far, according to the current effective legislation.
All right. We're going to leave Libe for a little bit to go in one of your other committees, the AFCO committee, the Constitutional Affairs Committee. So you know that there's been a lot of discussions for the past couple of years about reforming the EU to prepare for potential enlargement of the EU, etc., etc. So far, member states have refused to open the box of reforming the treaties. Do you think it's likely that EU reform will be happening in the next mandate, or for you it will take a much longer time before we can actually change the treaties?
The situation is gaining momentum as to the perspective of reforming the treaties. I landed in this European Parliament first when the Treaty of Lisbon entered into force with the Charter of Fundamental Rights December 2009. And I recall the first President of the EU Council, Henry Van Rompuy, making the point, Herman Van Rompuy, making the point that we would die under Lisbon Treaty. We would all die under Lisbon Treaty. He said, because it would last for the rest of our lives, considering the difficulties that had been encountered in order for the Lisbon Treaty to enter into force finally. But yet, just some 10 years later, it's only obvious that enlargement is untenable according to the current rules for many grounds, on many grounds. For one thing, it is impossible to enlarge without financial and budgetary reform. It is impossible to enlarge, second, without decision-making reform. You cannot have 35 commissioners. You cannot have a council of 35 deciding under the rule of unanimity how to respond to challenging urgencies, which are more and more often the case when it comes to rogue neighbors, namely Putin's Russia, a giant neighbor, calling for smart, sharp, resolved responses as we speak. It is untenable that we keep dragging our feet or blocked by a single dysfunctional member state or government, as we have seen, only because Hungary impeded some decision-making. The aid towards Ukraine has been stopped for months. That is untenable. And if it comes to enlargement, it'll take decision-making reforms. That'll make an impact, of course, in the agricultural policy, which is the biggest share of the EU budgeting. That'll make an impact on cohesion and structural funds, for sure, because it'll create new needs for the newcomers, which certainly will not be better off as the veterans of the club. But then the final point is that enlargement must be taken real seriously. We cannot make the mistake of enlarging without making sure that there is truly European will, a European feeling of belonging, a European identity shared by the newcomers, which means that they are willing to concede, They are willing to compromise with the rest of them, of the bunch of the club, and most importantly, they are willing to share the values that are enshrined in Article 2. Because I always insist, as chair of the Libre Committee, that the whole idea of the European Union was always political. It was never the single market and end of it. Never the currency and that would be the end of it. It was always political. Means that we have a social model that takes a lot of cohesion, meaning correcting inequalities in 3 dimensions: by social solidarity, by interterritorial solidarity, and intergenerational solidarity, which means safety for the elderly and opportunities for the young generations. That is the European social model. But most importantly, there is a European idea of democracy, which does not confine itself simply to having elections, because elections can be rigged, can be bugged, elections can be fake. And we need truly believable, credible, fair, regular elections, pluralistic elections. And it takes, besides ruling with a majority, protecting minorities, respecting minorities, and promoting the political pluralism. That is the European idea of democracy. Not only fundamental rights and separation of powers and independent judiciary protecting fundamental rights. It's about protecting minorities even more than having a majority.
But since you mentioned rule of law, I mean, you just said that the EU indeed is about value. It's about the rule of law, etc. It's not just having elections, but it's also a dynamic thing. I mean, we saw it in Spain. Sorry, we saw it in Poland. We saw it in Hungary. So at some point, you have a country that may respect the rule of law. That's why they entered the EU. But then the situation can degrade. So how do you ensure that? Once you tick the box to enter the EU, it doesn't degrade any further.
I've gone through that argument from the beginning to this very day, because we got started in the European Parliament when the Lisbon Treaty entered into force with the Charter of Fundamental Rights, discussing the so-called, by then, Copenhagen dilemma. What was the Copenhagen dilemma about? The Copenhagen criteria were the democratic criteria that the candidates to membership had to fulfill before entering the club, because they were decided in a remote Copenhagen council that took place in a remote Danish presidency in the early 90s, more than 30 years now. But then when the Lisbon Treaty entered into force, the Copenhagen dilemma became binding constitutional values enshrined in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union, namely rule of law, separation of powers, equal rights for men and women, individual rights protected by an independent judiciary, protection of minorities, and promotion of pluralism. Those are the values enshrined. And then we saw that despite some members, particularly through the large accession, the Grosserweiterung, by the big enlargement, the great enlargement that took place in 2004, through this big enlargement, some member states entered in the club with no other identity card than searching out for some kind of anti-Russian umbrella. No more than that, some kind of anti-Russian umbrella, because once upon a time in their past, they were in the Soviet Union,
yeah.
In the Soviet Union area of influence. But searching for a anti-Russian umbrella is not enough to be a member of the European Union. It really takes to go European in the will. It really takes to go European in the heart. And then we saw the so-called backsliding and regression of EU common values, namely first Hungary, which is still there, and then Poland. Poland had some 10 years of ruling of law and justice, nationalist, conservative, sliding back in every possible way, running afar from the European idea of independent judiciary and getting hold of the judiciary and of the public prosecutor's office, and using judiciary and public prosecutor in order to harass opponents, activists, human rights activists, lawyers, journalists, to extinguish media pluralism. We saw that in Hungary and Poland. That is what we launched Article 2, linked with Article 7 procedure, as a way to put pressure. Article 7, and then rule of law conditionality. We have seen that, and we have, of course, fought the battle all the way. But in view of reforming the treaties, it needs to be said that one of the points should be made that the cumbersome structure, the procedural structure of Article 7 should be corrected and improved to be more effective, so that decisions to sanction those who are in violation of their obligations as members of the European Union should be eased, so that we overcome the ruling of unanimity, exception made of the country under examination, towards qualified majority, so that we can actually exert pressure on countries which backslide from EU values, so that it should not expand as a syndrome. And what has happened with Hungary so far is not happening again, ever, in no other country. That is the kind of message I would like to endorse.
Still, just a final question on EU reform. The question in the chat say, according to you, if we have to go into deeper integration of the EU, should we try to have everyone at the same level, at the same page, advance slowly, or should we go towards a multi-speed Europe where some countries who are more ahead of the other can go further in the integration and the other will maybe integrate a bit further? So what is your opinion on let's say common approach versus multi-speed Europe?
It goes without saying that it's not up to me to decide.
Yeah, of course, but your preference.
I mean, we have Article 48, 49, and 50 of the European Treaty of the European Union. Article 48 providing for the reform of the treaties, including the decision-making. Article 49 setting the way forward as to candidates for membership, and Article 50 the possibility of exiting the European Union on a voluntary basis. That took actually place with the case of United Kingdom, the UK Brexit, which took us a long time. But if I am to respond the question, my answer would be there should be no further big enlargement, some kind of a teaming up enlargement of 6 countries altogether. Should be individual examination of the merits of the case of individual cases. We should examine individually, country by country. Of course, there should be milestones as to anti-corruption strategies, as to capacity building, as to the capacity not only to incorporate the rules of internal market, but the values and the European idea of democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights. Those should be criteria that should be examined individually to the member states.
But beyond enlargement, enlargement is one thing, but going further in the EU, even say we stay at 27 right now. If we have I don't know, France, Spain, Italy, Germany that decides to integrate further, they want to put more things in common. Should they be allowed to do this thing at 4 and the other stick with the current 27 rules, or should we just say no? Either everyone advance together on deeper integration, or no one moves.
No, it should be individual merits of the case. It makes no sense that 6 countries are put all together, because the situation have to be differentiated. They are actually different. Picture candidates. Is the same Ukraine, huge, agricultural, with territorial instability, facing huge strategic, geopolitical, and even security challenges. Is it the same than Montenegro or Macedonia? Is it the same situation? It is not. Factually, it is not. What I'm simply trying to imply that there should be an examination, a thorough examination of the merits, the individual merits of every case of candidates to membership, instead of packaging heterogeneous situations in a sort of big enlargement.
moving on, because I see the time running, and so I still want to discuss a couple of more topics very quickly. Since we discussed the rule of law since the end of last year, so you have a new government since last summer. Well, new government, your prime minister stayed in place, but one of the conditions for him to stay in place was to conclude an amnesty deal with the Catalan separatists, an amnesty deal, and the commission has decided to analyze this deal, the condition of this deal, to see if it respects the rule of law. Is that a topic that you have exchanged with the Commissioner Reinders, for instance, as chair of Libe, or what do you think of this procedure of the Commission on this?
Of course, regularly, intensely. Of course, it is in my capacities, it is in my duties, and it's my field of action. Of course, I have discussed extensively with Commissioner Reinders. I can only add that it was European Parliament's idea, precisely to meet the concerns aroused by the contradictions, shortcomings, and cumbersome conflicts of the implementation of Article 7 against a selected number of countries that had been put under examination, namely Hungary and then Poland, that the European Parliament came with the idea of putting in place a so-called rule of law, fundamental rights and democracy framework with a policy cycle, meaning in practice that there would be a regular examination, a preventive examination based on objective criteria, which are widely shared by all of the political groups of the European Parliament, of what the European idea of democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights stands for. And that has turned out to be the so-called European Union Fundamental Rights, Democracy, and Rule of Law report, which is presented by Commissioner Reinders before the Libe Committee every September, and then turns to be the subject matter of a resolution adopted in the plenary in Strasbourg.
But what about the case? What about the specific case of Spain? Because Spain has a current case because of this amnesty law in Catalonia. So, what is your take on this procedure that has been engaged, this analysis that has been engaged by the Commission on specifically on Spain?
Well, I'll be frank and sharp about this. Amnesty is a legal institution enshrined in the Constitution explicitly of at least 9 of the 27 member states of the European Union, and that has been actually adopted as a law, as an act adopted by Parliament in other 5 member states which do not contemplate or talk of amnesty in their written constitutions. So amnesty is not in contradiction with the European idea of rule of law, fundamental rights, and democracy. Amnesty has turned out to be a controversial issue in Spain because there is a progressive government which has committed itself to overcome a constitutional and territorial crisis that took place in 2017 when the conservatives were in government and we socialists were in opposition. We didn't cause that trouble. That trouble took place within the time frame of a conservative government. And in order to overcome the terrible damage that this episode caused to the Spain existential political will of living together and standing together, the progressive government led by Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez decided to come up with a proposition to adopt a so-called organic law, which is a qualified majority piece of legislation granting amnesty to those who were indicted, prosecuted, or convicted on the grounds of the unilateral declaration of independence that took place in Catalonia in 2017, which was declared illegal and unconstitutional by the Spanish Constitutional Court. The idea is helping the political will to live together, to exist peacefully in a democratic constitutional Spain, overcoming the damages and the wounds of the past. The idea then is a positive idea that I endorse and support. Second, I am a professor of constitutional law. I am intellectually and legally convinced that there is no contradiction between the parliamentary initiative that is now underway in the Spanish parliament and the Spanish constitution. So the problem is not the constitutionality of the bill. And the problem is not its compatibility with EU law either, because the bill is well framed to make it itself compatible with the Spanish constitution and with the EU law. Having said this, it is only obvious that it's controversial, because it is only obvious that the Spanish minority government has opposition, and that opposition is making everything at hand and all the noise they can make in the European Parliament in order to expand the assessment that the initiative taken by the Spanish progressive government is not compatible neither with the constitution nor with EU law. They're making a lot of noise in the European Parliament. But having said this, my conclusion is that opposition is political. They're making noise because they want to reverse the Spanish political situation. They want Pedro Sánchez out, they want the socialist government, the socialist coalition government out, and they want a conservative government to replace it. The sooner the better. That is a political goal, and it must be stated as political. It's not legal. The problem is not legal. The problem is not constitutional. The problem is not EU law. The problem is that they politically are determined to shorten the legislature and to put an end to Pedro Sánchez's government, which is, of course, an objective that I cannot support because I am a strong supporter of Pedro Sánchez and Spanish socialist government. So I would like to state it clearly that there is no legal or European law issue at stake in Spain. And of course, there is no a rule of law issue in Spain. Spain is a rule of law with no objection whatsoever, absolutely respectful to minorities and pluralism. Actually, whenever I see the stupid argument that Spain is in the same drive as Hungary and Poland, my answer is simple. That is grotesque. That is preposterous. In Hungary and Poland, the situation explains itself precisely because there has been a landslide absolute majority overrunning for years every minority rights, in contempt of minority rights and restricting pluralism by every possible way. In Spain, the situation is the contrary. There is a minority government, a coalition minority government, which is every day, on a day-to-day basis, strongly opposed by opposition, strongly opposed by the press, strongly opposed by public demonstrations, strongly opposed by free speech of criticism against the government. So Spain is a rule of law with no objection. There is no rights or minority rights which have been harassed whatsoever. The situation is beyond dispute as a EU law consistent rule of law situation. The only thing is that it's progressive government and there is a conservative opposition making everything at hand in order to shorten the life and put an end to this progressive government.
I would like to move on now for the final minutes on the EU elections. So you were in Rome last week for the S&D Congress, where you officially elected your head of list, your lead candidate for the elections, Nicolas Schmit, who is currently commissioner. He's a Luxembourgish socialist. How do you assess the chances of Nicolas Schmit to actually become president of the commission?
Well, first of all, we're making a point. We're sticking by the principle of the so-called Spitzenkandidat, which means we're making a strong bid for enhancing the parliamentary dimension of European politics, which means that we're making a strong bid of linking the outcome of the EU election, particularly of the election of the next European Parliament, with the investiture of the president-to-be of the next EU Commission. We would like it to be a progressive candidate. We would like it to be a progressive president. And the choice is Nicolas Schmit, because he's the one who has stepped forward. He's the one who has come with its availability to fill the job, because he has done an outstanding job as a commissioner in charge of the social dimension of EU policy and EU legislation, and it means a lot to the socialist family, because we have complained for years that the social pillar had been overlooked for all too long, severely damaged by the terrible management of the Great Recession, which was a catastrophe, arousing inequalities on the rise between member states and within member states. At a certain point of time, Stefan Löfven, current president of the European Party of the Socialist Party, the European Socialist Party, came with the Gothenburg summit, regaining momentum for the EU social pillar. And it received further momentum with Antonio Costa, rotating president of the EU Council, in the Porto summit. Now we have a new social pillar in the European Union with a youth guarantee, with a child guarantee, with a European framework of minimum wage, with dignity for researchers, dignity for trainees, for dignity for young opportunities, with a relaunchment of Erasmus+. That social dimension is very much incarnated in the delivery, in the record of Nicola Schmidt. That is why he was picked by the socialist family as a candidate, and we have endorsed his availability. And of course, it will all depend on the outcome of the election in June. We would like the European socialists to gain support and seats, but that's our fight, and we're up for a fight in that election.
And as a final point for the discussion, like alongside electing Nicola Schmidt, you have approved the S&D manifesto, and a key point that has been coming back again for the past few months is the S&D criticizing notably the EPP, so the center right, for their ambiguity on whether they would ally themselves with the ECR, so the hard right, let's say, in the European Parliament, which comprise parties like PiS. Might be even parties like Fidesz, the party of Giorgia Meloni, etc., etc. For you, what are the red lines that the EPP should not cross when in its relations with the ECR for? Because in the end, after the elections, well, you will have to elect a new president of the Commission and find a majority for future Commission.
That is the challenge you're referring to. First of all, the socialist family, the S&D family across the European Union, stands proudly as a bulwark of resistance and stark opposition to the rise of extreme right, far right, nationalist jingoism, and the national populism all across the European Union. We proudly fight against that tide. We proudly oppose and resist that incoming tide. And we, of course, criticize the mainstream conservative parties, which are now normalizing the far right by coalition governments with the far right. We have seen that in Finland. We have seen that in Sweden. We have seen that in Spain, many regional and local governments in which the mainstreaming the PP, the conservatives, are Vox, in coalition with the far right, which is some kind of a reivindication, reclaim of Franco symbolism, of Franco dictator symbolism in many ways, intolerance, and derogatory speech against minorities and entire categories of person, with macho attitudes, racist speech, anti-migration rhetorics. These kind of things must be stopped, must be put to a halt. And in that regard, the socialist family stands proudly against the tide. Second, it is challenging because, of course, there is an argument of how to face the rise of extreme right all across Europe. There are many who claim and argue that we should not talk of it, that we should somehow implement the tactique that was explained by an essay published in the early 21st century George Lakoff, don't think of an elephant. We shouldn't talk of the elephant. We should talk of something else. But the third point is that we can hardly avoid the risks of the rise of the extreme right, considering that the right of the extreme right is being positively supported and enhanced and fueled by media, not only conventional media, which are spreading fears that are being exploited electorally by the far right, namely anti-migratory prejudices, a negative understanding and look towards migrants, but also social media. Social nets are spreading more and more a caricature of political speech and debate in which simplistic formulas doomed to fail are winning the battle of everyday competition of ideas, prejudice, stigmatization, derogatory language, insulting rhetoric is gaining every day the political battlefield, gaining room and visibility and audibility on a day-to-day basis in the political argument. So we should be well aware that at times it is impossible to avoid issues that are not of our liking, because whether we like it or not, those are the horse of the battlefield. Those are the issues we are unescapably, unavoidably meant to talk of. And in my understanding, the rise of the extreme right is one of those issues. It's the expression, at the same time, is the symptom of a social unrest that we have to address with hope instead of fear, with positive answers instead of negative answers, with social inclusive policies instead of derogatory, denial, or exclusive answers, which are the kind of answers doomed to fail, typically of the extreme right.
All right, that's very clear. It's been an hour. I promised I would not bother you any longer. Before you go, if people have to remember one thing, if the audience has to remember one thing from tonight, what would be your message to them?
Vote in the European election because it is about you. The European Parliament happens to be the only directly elected body. That was my first statement in this conversation in the European architecture. It is actually the only directly elected supranational lawmaking body in the world. And you know what? We do make laws about issues which are essential for each and every one who might be following this conversation. The European Parliament's budgetary authority. It is decisive when it comes to the multi-annual financial framework and the budgeting of the European Union. It is decisive when it comes to investing and then hence deciding the leadership and the composition of the EU Commission. It examines on a previous basis, on a preemptive basis, each and every one of the commissioners designate before assuming their portfolios. Before holding their portfolios, they are to be examined by the European Parliament. And if they do not pass the exam, they won't make it to the European Commission. But then the European Parliament exerts parliamentary scrutiny and control regularly upon the Commission. The European Parliament legislates on fundamental rights, privacy, artificial intelligence, dignity, confidentiality of data, equal rights, non-discriminatory clauses, protecting LGBTIQ, protecting minorities all across Europe against harassment or violation of their rights, protecting independence of judiciary with judicial guarantees and procedural guarantees. We are criminal lawmakers. We make laws against cross-border serious crime, from corruption to trafficking of human beings, sexual exploitation, drug trafficking, terrorism, all the way to sexual abuse online, environmental crimes, or even violence against women. We make laws on matters that are absolutely essential and relevant for the everyday life and well-being of the European citizens we represent. So my message can be, but do vote, because it is about you. June 2024, we represent you. This European Parliament belongs to you, and you belong to the European Parliament. Take seriously the European Parliament election 2024, and please come to the polls and vote.
That's a message I can get behind. That's a message I can get behind. So thank you very much. Chat, make sure to thank Mr. Juan Fernando Lopez Aguilar for his time. You can follow him on X. You can see the ad just below the video feed. Mr. Lopez Aguilar, thank you again for taking the time to answer our question tonight. I hope you enjoyed the experience. For sure, it was very interesting. We discussed many very interesting topics, migration, etc. It's always a pleasure to discuss this. So I wish you a very good evening, and well, maybe another time on the channel. It will be with great pleasure on my side, at least.
It's been my pleasure to talk to you, and I thank you all.
Thank you.
It's
bye
been
bye.
my pleasure. Wish you well. Wish you the best. See you next time. Bye.
See you. All right, chat. Let me cut the thing, and then we can debrief everything. Let me think. Let me know what you thought. In the meantime, as usual, I have my thing where I took notes. We discussed many things. Not everything that I wanted to discuss. To be honest, I had more like topics I wanted to cover. But we of course, like as soon as we start talking about the migration and asylum package, you end up talking a lot. It was a handful. Oh no, I don't think it was a handful. Like he was making a very detailed explanation. You could see that he has a background as a university teacher, but yeah, I don't think he was too much of a handful. I've seen MEPs who are a handful. He was not. He was not a handful. He was very manageable. He was more like okay. He was explaining things in detail, which was, I mean, it's kind of the purpose. It's kind of a purpose. He dodged some. I don't know if he dodged or didn't understood some question, like on multi-speed Europe. He clearly he wanted to talk about enlargement and not about multi-speed. So I don't know if it's because I wasn't clear in my question, or if he wanted to slip the question. But yeah, I will put that on the on me not being clear. But yeah, I did notice as well that some. I would have liked some more details on the on certain question, but we're going to rediscuss that. So, as he mentioned at the beginning, so he's the chair of the Libe committee, as we say, and so it's the Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs committee in the Parliament. He said, yeah, that's one of the most intense, the one that does the most law in the Parliament. It's true. And that makes Libe kind of a nightmare. Like Libe is notoriously like a committee that is extremely difficult to handle, because everything that you do in there is from starters, there's a lot of legislation going through it, and everything that you do is highly consensual. Like you talk about migration, you talk about justice, you talk about home affairs, so migration, you talk about data protection, etc., etc. So every single topic is very confrontational. It's a very aggressive kind of thing. So usually in the Parliament, like when you ask someone, where do you work, and they answer that they work in Libe, you tend to respect them and at the same time feel sorry a bit for them, because like it's very hard work, but it takes a lot of energy, and when you are lucky to work on an easier committee, like yeah, I would not like to work in Libe because it's very intense. It takes a very strong personality, but these issues are very important and very interesting nonetheless. But yeah, it's a committee I was happy that I would not have to work on, because it's you just going into a fist fight every single topic. So it's not the most relaxing committee, far from it. But again, then you deal with important topic. We discussed a lot about the migration and asylum package, which is this new. It's been proposed like a few years ago now, but the new attempt of the EU to try I can't speak anymore. To address the issue of migration following the migrant crisis in 2015, when there was like after the civil war in Syria, like 1 million people showing up at the doors of Europe, and Europe suddenly realizing that its rules were not exactly meant to deal with this situation. And since then, the EU has been trying to find a solution, because as he explained, the main issue in migration today is that, I mean, the new trends of migration is that you have a limited number of countries, mostly southern countries, so Italy, Spain, Greece, Malta, Cyprus, who have to bear the brunt of the migratory pressure, because that's where that's through these countries that people arrive, and the other countries tend to be, oh well, good luck with it. We're not we don't want to deal with it. So it created a lot of frustration among these countries who felt like that there was a lack of solidarity. It built up on the let's say the concerns around migration throughout the years, especially as the EU was not managing to find the balance between solidarity. So the fact that the southern European country wanted the other country to help out, like taking maybe some migrants and building capacities so that they can manage things, and also address the concern that, moving in the EU should not be illegally in the EU should not be as easy, and you should have a strong system to manage migration and asylum. It failed in 2016, between 2016 and 2018, and during this mandate, the Commission came with a new proposal, the migration and asylum package, more a package because it's not just one law, it's 10 law. It's 10 law, and out of plus a few instruments that are non-legislative. So it's a big thing, kind of a big thing. It took a long time to find a solution, and to be fair, it's impressive that they managed to find a deal. And they found an agreement last December under the Spanish presidency. And as it happens, our guest, Mr. Lopez Aguilar, was the rapporteur on one of these files. And in any case, he attended pretty much all negotiations, because in the Parliament, so when you have the trilogue, so the negotiations on the law between the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council. So you have the rapporteur, the shadow rapporteur, so the main negotiators. But the chair of the committee is always invited. So since he's chair of the Libe committee, who is in charge of these files, he has the right to be present and participate to every single of these negotiations. I don't know if he attended all of them, because probably there were some who were happening at the same time, but he was probably following extremely closely the issue over the past few years. And I said it was surprising that they managed to find an agreement, because, like I said, it's highly politically toxic as a topic, very sensitive. The EU failed to find a deal before in 2018 or 2019? 2018, I think. The EU actually said, okay, fine, we failed. We didn't manage to find a deal. And I remember, like, I think it was in 2021, I welcomed, I had a guest, a French guest, a French MEP, socialist as well, who is working in Libe. And back then I remember, the Commission made a new proposal on asylum. Do you think that we will ever see the end of it? And she's like, no, I don't think so, because it's too conflictual. Member states are too divided about it, because on the one hand you have the southern country who absolutely need solidarity to deal with migrants, and on the other hand you have the other countries who absolutely do not want to deal with migration at all, and it's very difficult to find the balance. But in the end, they found a balance for the most part, and now the law, the package of law is in the final stage. It will be finalized, let's say, in April in plenary, and then we will have a new package of laws that generally speaking, in terms of trend, goes pretty clearly towards tightening the screws around migration, but also introducing solidarity. So that's why he was saying, yeah, for me it was difficult. I'm a socialist, but that's not exactly the text I would have liked myself. But I have to make compromises, and in the end, even if it's not exactly what I wanted, it's still improving things on the ground. We have solidarity. We have stronger rights for asylum seekers. So that's something I can live with. Not all socialists, not everyone is agreeing with you. Thanks for coming by. Not everyone is agreeing with that, and part of the socialists are actually unhappy with this agreement. The Greens are unhappy with it. The far left is unhappy with it. I'm shown as unstable in terms of stream. Like, I don't see any problem. Okay, I will assume that it's fine. But if you see me cutting or whatever, let me know. But okay, I will assume that it's fine. NGOs are very unhappy with the deal. They consider that it's tightening too much the screws, etc., etc. But yeah, it was very clear that, well, it's either that or nothing, and nothing is not sustainable. It's a terrible solution. So I'd rather have some advancement on some things than nothing at all. Going back to that point, so on tightening the screws, so we have a bunch of new processes. So for instance, something that we didn't discuss in detail, you have a new system where migrants that enter illegally the EU will be put in closed center, where they will be go through screening. So they will have to go through security checks, this sort of thing, like put their data in Eurodac. Eurodac is a database of information on migrants who enter the EU, and they will have the first filtering, let's say, between those who are like who have less likely to receive an asylum request. So those who, if you come from a country that has a percentage of asylum request accepted below 20%, so basically it's more likely that your asylum request is going to be refused. Then you're going to be staying in this closed center, and you will go through an accelerated procedure to see, okay, are you among those who actually is not eligible to asylum, and so we will reject your asylum request faster and send you back here if we can. And the rest would have the normal asylum procedure. So there's a bit of a filtering between those who are less likely to receive asylum and the rest. In those closed centers that are under so-called legal fiction, where basically it is at the border of the EU, on the EU territory, but when you are in there legally, they create the fiction that you're not on the EU. So they will assume that you are not on European territory, so that they can do the process before you do the asylum procedure. Deportation is a real thing. Well, deportation is not the right word. When the asylum request is rejected, that means that you don't have a vocation to stay on the territory, or at least your asylum request is not accepted. It's up to the country to decide whether then, as a regular migrant, they want to keep you or they don't want to keep you, because you have two things. You have the migrants and the refugees. Refugees are people who are protected under international law, meaning that they are people who cannot live any longer in their home country because of a war, because of persecution, etc. And because of that, they receive a special status, the status of refugees, that is mandatory. Like all countries, signatories of the Geneva Convention, have to respect it, and they are allowed to stay in another country and be protected. And to have this status of refugees, you need to do an asylum request. So those asylum and refugees, they are under international law. Migrants, it's everyone else. So if you're not eligible to the status of refugee, so your asylum request is rejected, then you're just a regular migrant. And then for regular migrants, it's up to the country whether they want to accept or not a migrant. So all refugees and asylum seekers are migrants, but not all migrants are refugees. That's the first distinction. And so if you if your country decides that you should not stay on the territory and your asylum request was rejected, then they can return you. If they have the possibility to return you. Problem is that to send you back to a safe country, to your country of origin, etc., etc. The issue is that as of today, the return rate is rather low. Like actually, many migrants whose asylum request has been rejected are not going back to their country for various reasons. For instance, because their home country does not want. Because to return someone to his country, you don't just put them on a flight and then send the flight to that country. You need to have an agreement between the EU and that origin country so that they accept to take back their people. And sometimes countries do not accept that, so it's an additional level of difficulty. Sometimes they're no longer in the country when you have to return them. So there's plenty of difficulties that happens, and you have lower rates of return. I'm looking for the exact statistics. I had it before. I know that in France it's 8%, the return rate. So out of 100% of people who should be returned to their home country, only 8% are actually returned. Because the home country does not want, because the people, well, obviously they don't want to return to the country, so they escape, and so they can't be found. So it's very low return rate, and it's one of the aspects where there is no deal at EU level yet on the return policy, and apparently it's going to move on the in the next mandate. But yeah, that's also a source of difficulty with third country, because well, they do not accept to take their country back, to take their people back. And one tendency now across the past few years, when the EU now negotiates agreement with this country, so for instance, I don't know, an African country, for development aid, etc., now more and more, the EU basically says, okay, if you want the EU to help you in terms of development aid, in terms of humanitarian aid, etc., fine, but in exchange, you need to also commit to things in terms of migration. You need to agree that you will take back the migrant that were refused in the EU. You need to take measures to prevent people from leaving your country in the first place, have a procedure in place, etc. So more and more, there is a linkage between, let's say, development policy and migration policy. That's a trend, because well, it's a way to try to force, in a way, the third countries to help the EU not having these migrants in the first place. So that's, let's say, on the more tightening the screws part. Then there is the solidarity part in the package, which is why MEP Lopez Aguilar is supportive of the package, even if it's imperfect, blah blah blah. Basically, now, so we have a bunch of rights that are guaranteed to the asylum seekers, so that they have access to legal assistance, this sort of things. But there is the big part, let's say, the big innovation in there is the solidarity mechanism to the benefit of countries that are, to the frontline countries, the countries that have to bear the biggest part of migration: Italy, Greece, Spain, Malta, Cyprus, etc. And basically now there is the possibility for up to 30,000 migrants to be shared, let's say, or unburdened to the other country, meaning that, let's say, France is not a frontline country. There is a lot of migrants, let's say, arriving in Italy. France will have the possibility to say, okay, I have the duty to show solidarity to Italy. So what I will do is I can take a few migrants I can take some of the migrants. So instead of saying to Italy, okay, these migrants arrived on your territory, deal with it, it's not my problem, France will say, okay, I'm going to take 300, 500, 600 of the migrants that arrived on your territory, and instead of you having to handle them, well, they will come to France and I will handle them instead of you. I will be the one responsible for the asylum request and this sort of thing. You can also provide additional aid, etc., etc. But exactly, that's the point. if a country refuses to take a part of these migrants, a portion of these migrants, bearing in mind it's maximum 30,000 people in the entire EU, it's not 30,000 people per country, it's 30,000 people divided by 27. It's different from country to country. The smaller country obviously have less of an obligation. They have to take less migrants, but 30,000 people maximum. And if a country, let's say Poland, let's say Hungary, refuses, say no, I don't want any of these migrants on my territory, fuck off. Well then, the regulation says, okay, fine, you do not want to take these migrants. Well then, you have to pay a check. You have to write a check to a special funds of the EU to help out nonetheless. And so they have to pay 20,000 euro per migrant that they will refuse. So that way, they don't want to show solidarity by taking some of these migrants themselves. Then they pay up, and the money will be used to build infrastructure, to help Italy or Greece or whatever, to go into the external dimensions or the agreements with with third country to prevent migration. So everyone, one way or another, has to show solidarity, which is the main reason why the far right hates the deal, and also Hungary, Poland absolutely hate the deal, because they see that the way they see it is like, okay, we're being punished if we don't want to have any migrants on our territory, and so that's why they absolutely hate it. But that's the way that there was a majority to say, okay, that's the way to show solidarity towards from the country between on the front line and the others, and that's the thing that allows let's say more progressive MEPs to say, okay, that's good enough, that's a progress enough to support this deal. Let me check some everything. If you have questions or whatever, go in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going through my stuff. Yeah, he was very adamant that it's a compromise. You have to deal with it, and that's better. That's better than nothing. They should have done it so the money is automatically deducted from the EU funds. No, because then it would be actual punishment. The idea of it is not that it is. The idea of it is not punishment. The idea of it is, okay, you have to show solidarity one way or another. If you were to say either you take migrants or you lose EU money, yeah, that's punishment. Here is just saying, no, you have to pay for something. Either you take some migrants or you put fresh money into the pot. And so that's more money that then is being used to the benefit of the frontline countries or to address migration. So that's why it's solidarity and not punishment. You want to punish Hungary? Well, I would say that Hungary is already having missing a few checks. I think right now they're missing 20 billion euros. So they already. They really have a burning hole in their pocket when it comes to EU money. But again, like here, you're trying to create a link. Chump change for 20 billion. It's not exactly chump change for the Hungarians. It's huge. it's huge. I think I'm trying to remember the exact figure. Shit, I don't have the exact. I don't remember, but like at some point, all the money that they got cut was like 20% of all the money they received from the EU, if not more. So we're not talking about small amounts of money. Anyway, what else did we have? Looking at the time as well, because I don't want to. He's against Catalonia independency. Well, he's socialist. So the Spanish socialists are against the independence of Catalonia. They're in favor of Spain being Catalonia remaining in Spain. However, well, then he touched into the touchy topic of how do you handle this thing, and that's where like he was a bit. I agree. He was a bit slippery at the end when I asked, okay, well, the Spanish government has been criticized for the amnesty deal it has done with Catalonia. So basically, I'm doing it short. So in 2017, you had an illegal referendum that was organized in Catalonia to assert independence, fully legal referendum, etc., etc. Those who organized this referendum fled the country for partly. Some of them even became MEP later, but they fled the country. And so that was 2017. It was initially under right-wing government. Then it became the Pedro Sanchez government from 2019 or something like that, I think. 2019 or 2020. I don't remember exactly. But basically, it became a socialist government. Which was trying to, like, say, breach thing, but still was saying, okay, the referendum was illegal. It's not acceptable the way it was done. And there was a push for a long time of the separatists say, oh well, we should not be punished for what we did. There should be an amnesty because otherwise you are harassing a minority, blah 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 blah. But the line of the government so far has always been, okay, no, we're ready to reestablish a political dialogue with the Catalan separatists, but it needs to be in line with the law, and we will not support an amnesty. That was the position until 2023, when Pedro Sanchez managed to save his skin. So the current socialist prime minister of Spain managed to save his skin against all odds. He made a gamble that worked for him because he was supposed to lose the government. In the end, he managed to stay by making a deal with the Catalan separatists. And so he has a minority government. So the Spanish socialists do not have a majority in the Spanish parliament, but they have the support of the Catalan separatists. And so they made suddenly a deal where, well, of course, we're going to do an amnesty law to the benefit of the Catalan separatists, and we're also going to shield them from repercussion from the court. We're going to intervene into the way the justice system works in Spain to the benefit of the Catalan. So the criticism against the socialists were that, well, even if they say, oh yeah, it's to breach the differences with us, ensure social peace in the country, heal the wound, blah blah blah. A lot of people saw that happening right after the elections, when Pedro Sanchez needed the votes of the Catalan to stay in power. So it's maybe not as disinterested as it is. And since it impacted the judicial system, well, the right, and he is right to say that MEP Lopez Aguilar say, oh yeah, it's a political affairs. The right is trying to kick out the Spanish government. It's true, and so they're hyping up the issue, saying, oh yeah, it's a threat to the rule of law in Spain. It's illegal, blah blah blah. Spain is the socialist. Spain on the socialist is turning into Hungary, blah blah blah. Which of course is an exaggeration. Like Spain is not turning into Hungary. But nonetheless, the Commission decided to open an investigation. Late last year, they say, okay, there are some things happening in Spain around this amnesty law. It involves the independence of the judiciary. We're going to analyze the situation and see if there is an issue. So even if the situation in Spain is not comparable at all with Poland or Hungary, which are way further when it comes to rule of law issues, still there's a procedure that is being opened, and there is an accusation that, well, the social government was a bit cynical in its way to deal with the Catalan and granting this amnesty. While in the past they were opposed to it. So we will see how it evolves. And the proposal of the law, there was the amnesty proposal was actually rejected in the Spanish Parliament in January because of the Catalan considered that the amnesty was not wide enough. They considered that it still allowed them to be pursued under terrorism or social terrorism and treason or something like that. and so they want the law to be broader. So we'll see what come out of it, but yeah, the situation in Spain, there is a question of a procedure, not a procedure, but an investigation of the Commission on the rule of law in Spain linked to this amnesty law in Catalonia. What else did we discuss? We discussed here reform, where he said basically, yeah, we need a EU reform because we can't, if we have to enlarge the EU. Well, the EU is already struggling at 27. It's not going to work at 30, 35. So you need to review the rules. Otherwise, it's simply impossible. You have to ensure that there is more qualifying majority. You need to see what would be the impact of enlargement. Here he was talking without mentioning Ukraine. Because when he said, yeah, there would be an impact on agriculture, there would be an impact on cohesion policy, because, Ukraine is a big country, pretty big country with a huge agricultural sector. It's obviously poorer than many European countries, and so if and when Ukraine joins the EU, it will have massive consequences on the way EU funds are currently working, and particularly on agriculture and cohesion funds. Cohesion funds is the regional development funds to help poorer regions of the EU develop themselves and become richer, better equipped, etc., etc. And the sheer size of Ukraine and its sector means that the second it enters, a huge part of the European agriculture policy, which is 30% of the EU budget, would shift to Ukraine and create, of course, and so you have a lot of farmers today that benefit from the common agricultural policy. They would then no longer get money. So indeed, France go broke, but also Poland goes broke because suddenly lots of farmers would not get money, and even more important, they would find themselves in competition with Ukrainian farmers. And they don't like that at all. So there's a whole question about agriculture behind Ukraine. And sorting it out will not be a small feat. And then you have the question of the cohesion funds. Again, the funds that go to the poor region of the EU to help them develop. Same thing. The second Ukraine joins, it's such a big country and it needs so much help that countries that currently are what you call net beneficiary, so they receive more EU money than they give to the budget. So if you are an eastern country, well, your countries your regions are poorer than, let's say, western regions. Well, you receive more money from the EU, more than you give. You make a check. I invent the figures. You make a check of 1 billion euro to the EU, but you receive 2 billion from the EU funds. So you're a beneficiary of 1 billion euro. Ukraine arrives. Ukraine has such high needs in terms of funding that suddenly you would still give 1 billion euro to the EU, but because Ukraine is now in and they have more needs of the funds than you are, well, suddenly you only receive 800 million euro from the EU, and that makes you a net contributor. And most of the EU would suddenly shift from being beneficiary to contributor to the EU budget because all the money would be funneled to Ukraine. And indeed, Spain was not always a net beneficiary, no, especially in the early years. I mean, remember that Spain, like Portugal, when they joined after being under a dictatorship, and they were economically behind the rest of the EU. So no, especially at the beginning, no, Spain was a beneficiary, and then as the situation evolved, I'm not sure these days it's a net beneficiary. I would not be surprised if at least after 2004, when the Eastern countries entered, it became a net contributor. Let me check that actually. Net beneficiaries EU. So money for me, but not for the. I mean, you need to look at this from a let's say, a contability approach. Like, if you listen to the far right in France, for instance, they will say, oh yeah, the France pays more money to the EU than it receives, so the EU is a terrible deal for France. Except that no, that's not the case. The benefits of the EU is not just the value of the check that you receive from the EU. It's the benefit of the EU is much more than that. France benefits a lot from the EU, even if they don't receive as much money than they give. Why? Because, well, you have the benefits of Schengen, you have the benefits of Erasmus, you have the benefits of being in the single market, you're a rich country, so you have suddenly 27 country market instead of one country market. So you have a lot of benefits that make your country richer, more developed, but that is not linked to the EU writing you a check. So the whole argument about, we're not contributors, so the EU is not beneficial for us, complete bullshit. Absolute complete bullshit. Like, you get benefit from the EU much, like the large majority actually of the benefits of the EU are not checks. It's not just the check that you receive from the EU. Biggest benefit is the fact that Germany did not cross the Rhine again in 70 years. That's one benefit among others. So let's see. Give me a sec. I will show you something. Up. Tac. Give me a sec. I'm with you in a minute. Screw you. Go away. Up. Browser. Yes. Okay, it works. Now let me do things properly, and I will show you this. So this is in 2021. We only have the article is from 2023 and the data from 2021. So you see here the countries that are beneficiaries or contributors to the EU budget. And so you see there Germany, France, Netherlands, Italy, Sweden. Oh, Spain is not a contributor. Interesting. I would have thought that Spain would be a contributor. So you see there's like 6, 7, 9. There's 9 countries that give more money to the EU than they receive. The biggest one being, of course, Germany and France. And so then you have all the others that receive more money from the EU than they give. The biggest beneficiaries being Poland, Greece, and Hungary. And Spain, I'm surprised actually that they receive more money than they benefit. Although they do have, I mean, still not as developed as France and Germany. They receive a lot of EU funding for agriculture. They have the outermost region. So, okay, interesting. Luxembourg. Where's Luxembourg? Luxembourg. For what do they receive EU funds? That's a good question. Because they are actually per capita the richest country of the EU. I don't expect them to receive a lot of money from the CAP or whatever. Huh. I genuinely don't know why. You know what? I'll make a note because that'd be interesting to. Because, like, I mean, you look at this, it's indeed a bit of an anomaly to see countries like Luxembourg or Belgium be in this. Are recovery plans counted in this? No, because if there was a recovery plan, like Italy would be very much beneficiary. So I don't think it counts the. Yeah, its net contributions to the EU budget. I don't know why Luxembourg. Interesting. I'll make a note of it. Ireland being solo is very strange. No, actually, it's more progress. Ireland back in the day was probably more in the beneficiaries than in the contributors. And since the contribution is indexed pretty much on how rich you are, how big of a country, how rich you are as a country. Ireland had seen quite an economic boom since the financial crisis. So not surprising that they get they give a lot of money to the EU, but I will investigate this Luxembourg thing. That's indeed very weird. Why is Luxembourg a net beneficiary? That will be an interesting question, because either let's see. I want to see the how they calculate. Let's see. EU budget contribution calculation. EU institution? You think it's because of the EU institutions? But does the check goes to the Yeah, because I would track, because then I would explain why you also have Belgium. But what part of the... Because if it's the institution themselves, the budget stays in the institutions, it doesn't go to the country. Isn't Ireland GDP usually inflated by the big tech GDP? Yeah, it's a big part of their thing for sure. So so what does the website of the council says? How does it work in detail? The percentage should be applied to each member state GNI. The core rate varies year to year, determined according to the total of all other EU budget revenues. Depending on the total annual revenues needed to finance expenditure, new focal rate is then applied to GNI, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't tell me much, actually. How do they calculate this thing? It's frustrating. How is the EU contribution calculated? Contribution from each member state for a percentage of that budget, which is calculated from two main factors: gross national income and the size of the VAT base. I really should dig into that. Because I always assume it was like according to the size of the country. Okay, well, doesn't matter. Let's see. Well, I missed a few messages. Maybe Ukraine's ascension could be a good time to redo the financing. Yeah, I think that Ukraine's adhesion to the EU will be a good time to redo a lot of things. That's for sure. Either way, it just shows how deep in shit we are if the German economy fails and can't pay for all this. Yeah, I mean, we're in deep shit anyway. If the German economy fails or the French economy fails, or yeah, we're in deep shit. I would tend to say that indeed if the first two economies of the EU fails, given the links between the various member states, yeah, we're all gonna be in deep shit. Remember the debt crisis? It was Greece, not exactly the biggest economy, and Euro was not exactly in the happiest place because of that. Yeah, of course, the Italian economy. Yeah, no, indeed. I see where I have the reference, because for those who don't know, indeed, this year actually Italy's growth is superior to the growth of Germany. So it's rather ironic indeed, given that Italy is often described as the failing economy compared to the powerful Germany. This year actually, the part of the fact that the EU was stealing the EU economy as a whole was stealing growth was because Italy overperformed and compensated, let's say, the loss of performance from Germany. I will quit that. I'm sure there's an equation somewhere that I can find to calculate the contribution. Making a note. All right. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Georgia Meloni is superior to Olaf Scholz. Depends on what. Hungarian economy fell back into... Well, many economies were not in a good place in 2008. That's for sure. That's for sure. Anyway, I put that away, but no, I still need it. What else did we discussed? Yeah, on multi-speed Europe, it totally... I mean, I don't know if he didn't understand the question or he decided to dodge it. But yeah, he kept wanting... Oh, shit. He kept wanting to talk about enlargement when I wanted to talk about multi-speed Europe. So multi-speed Europe is this idea that is notably pushed by France, where instead of saying, okay, the EU must always progress all together, so all 27 countries progress together, multi-speed Europe is the idea of saying, okay, you have the basis, you have the EU rules, the EU competencies, but if you have some countries, a group of countries that decide that they want to go further, that they want to share more competence at EU level, well, then they should be able to do so. So you would have France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and whatever, who would decide to say, okay, you have the basic EU rules, but we want to go further on this policy or this policy. And so voluntarily, we're going to do that. And they will go ahead, and the other will stay at the level that they are, and maybe they can join at a later time. So that's the idea, that you don't have to wait for consensus between all 27 to deepen the union, to increase the level of cooperation between member states, and to dodge a bit the issue of veto. It's a controversial concept. Because while some see that as a way to go faster in terms of integration, the countries that want it can go further in terms of European integration, and then in a way they say, okay, we're going to try it, and then the other will see that it works and they will want to join us, and so that keeps the EU, let's say, dynamic. On the other hand, like particularly in Eastern Europe absolutely hates the idea of multi-speed Europe, because their interpretation of the concept is that it's just the Western Europeans that will want to leave behind the others. And if you have the Western Europeans that want to use multi-speed Europe to go further on some things, well, then that would make the others, the Eastern Europeans, secondary Europeans. They would not be as Europeans as the other. Maybe they would be discriminated in terms of EU funds. So they see that as a demonstration of them becoming second-rate Europeans, and they absolutely hate the idea. So you have a lot of debates on this, and whether you should ensure that everyone is on the same page and advance together, or if some who want to go faster can do it or not. Bearing in mind that there is also some possibility to do that with what is called the enhanced cooperations, where some countries can already, in some areas, under some conditions, go further in some areas, and then if it works, the other will join up. But it's a tool that is very rarely used. Otherwise, what did we discuss? To finish, we discussed a little bit the elections, and particularly the Spitzenkandidat. And so he dodged a bit the question, saying, "Oh yeah, but when I asked, oh, do you think Nicolas Schmitt, so the Spitzenkandidat of the Socialists, has a chance to become president of the Commission?" He just said, "Oh no, it's more about making a point that we support the system," and he didn't answer the question. I knew more or less already the answer, because so to become president of the Commission, you need to win the elections. And all the polls show that it's the EPP who will win the elections. And very likely, it's going to be von der Leyen who will stay as president of the Commission. And there's a lot of question on, well, Nicolas Schmitt, who is not the most well-known socialist in the EU, rather the contrary, is a bit of a sacrificial lamb. Like, they have to do the Spitzenkandidat because, well, that's that they believe in the concept. But they know that it's a pretty much a lost battle. They accepted that they're going to lose. They're not going to be first in the election, and that von der Leyen is going to stay. And they just put Nicolas Schmidt as well, the guy who has to take the bullet for the team. And actually, what will matter is the rest of the top jobs. So what party gets the presidency of the commission, what party gets so likely EPP, who gets presidency of the parliament, who gets the presidency of the council, who gets the job of EU foreign minister, these sort of things. But yeah, the consensus is that Nicolas Schmidt is a bit sent there to die politically because, well, the EPP is very, 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 very likely going to win the elections instead of the biggest group in the European election, and then it would make von der Leyen the natural candidate, and she's almost certain to become the next president of the EU. But yeah, I asked the question just in case, but I did not expect him to say no. I don't expect Nicolas Schmidt to win. But yeah, I'm telling you why I probably dodged the question. And to finish, yeah, we discussed this question of the EPP flirting with at least part of the ECR. We saw that in the various green legislation over the past year, where more and more the EPP is willing to build coalitions. Coalition is the wrong word. Majorities on some texts with the ECR, with the hard right in the parliament, and even the far right, to stop some legislation. And that's a shift that is worrying in the S&D, because the S&D is saying, okay, you're starting to play a bit too much with fire. We understand that you don't like us, but still you should not break bread with the far right, because then, well, you're no longer part of the pro-European groups, and you're basically normalizing their ideas, and that's going to be problematic for us all later, because, well, if you start embracing the ideas of the far right, well, what's the difference between you and the far right? Pretty much. And there's a lot of debates about that, because especially as we expect that there will be progress of the far right in the elections. The estimates goes up to 25% of the parliament would be hard right or far right. And ideologically, the center of gravity will also move to the right. And so that's a bit worrying the socialists, because even if there's the far right is progressing, even if you have the center of gravity that moves to the right, there is no right-wing majority. Like EPP, ECR, or even ID, that's sort of, it doesn't make a majority. Like the majority is the center of gravity, the center of majority will be EPP, S&D, Renew. I'm voting. I will not tell you what I vote, but I can certainly assure you that I will not vote RN. So RN is the French far right. Like that, I can tell you. That's over my dead body. You will never see me in my life vote for the far right. That much is for sure. Anyway, so there's a lot of debates around that. Typical leftist streamer. Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm the most leftist streamer. I remember that I used to work for the EPP. Huh? Never say never. I can say never on this one. On the far right, yep, I can say never. I am pretty sure at 150% that I will never vote for the far right. That's for sure. So why in principle, there's a reason why you say never. On this one, I can say never. I'm actually certain that never applies in that case. Zemmour is far right. Yes, in France, he is considered far right as well. Ah, okay. If you consider that TPP is far left and ECR is center left, yes, indeed. Yeah, then I'm probably a radical leftist. Clip that and say it to me in 20 years. I can assure you that in 20 years I will not vote far right. But clip it if you will, and hold me accountable in 20 years if need be. I will happily take the L if necessary. Is France the only country with too far? No. Italy. Italy, you have two countries on the far right. You have Fratelli Italia, the party of Giorgia Meloni, and you have Lega Nord with Salvini. No voting for it is the most likely. The only thing I can promise you I won't do into the air. Idea. Stop the trolling. ID literate centrist as renew. Indeed, yeah. In a parallel universe, maybe not this one for now, or ever. Anyway, we're trolling. I see time passing. So unless you have a burning question, I will do the conclusion for today. I'm just putting things aside. All right. So I hope that you enjoyed this interview. As usual, if you like what you saw, follow the channel if it's not already the case. If you have a Prime lying around, toss a coin to your streamer. That's always much appreciated. Any other interviews planned? Not this week. This week I'm just do one interview. Usually I just do one interview per week. Last week was a bit different. The next interview, I don't have an interview next week because I'm away part of the week. So actually the streaming schedule will be probably lighter because I'm away part of the week. And then let me check my schedule. I have one more interview in French. And then it's more in April. So I still have a few slots. You would love to see some Eastern European MEP sometime. I did have a few MEP from Eastern Europe. I have written to a few. It's just that for now I don't get that many answers from them. But also since we are approaching the elections, I'm trying to move from, let's say, the regular MEPs and moving for the more high level. And gaining more into the election mode, let's say. Soon the new pool is coming, yeah. Indeed, a new pool of MEP will be coming. But we'll see then what we do with that pool. But yeah, for now, I have an interview in 2 weeks in French, and then it's gonna be in April, and I need to do the new batch of interviews, etc. So that's on my to-do list of things I have to do. Send emails to say, oh, do you want to do an interview on Twitch with me? Please, thank you. But yeah, in any case, if on your side there are MEPs or people you think would be interesting or you would like to see coming on the channel, don't hesitate to let me know. There will be interviews where we try to be a bit more forceful to make the presentation stick more to the point and the criticism just... Yeah, that's always the difficulty. I see your point. For starting, it's always difficult to do that online. When you are in a face-to-face meeting, it's much easier, like to interrupt and to be a bit more forceful than online. First, you have this difficulty. Then it's more question also of how. Usually, I like to let the MEPs develop their point. And they're ready to explain their thing. I don't want to do an interview where it's just punchline after punchline after punchline. It's not what I think is the most interesting. I'd rather let the MEPs explain like their reasoning and what they think that. While trying to keep them on track if I can. But yeah, that's. I see your point. It's always a difficulty when you're doing it online, and you have to find a balance between that and pushing them to just stick to punchlines, because it's not as interesting, I think, if you just have the punchlines or the already made arguments. Most of the time, I mean, and like today there was clearly some question that he dodged. Clearly, I tried to push, but at some point, I mean, I also see the time. I'm not going to go into an argument for 10 minutes because he doesn't want to answer a question. If he doesn't want to answer a question, even if I'm asking again the question, well, I mean, okay, fine. Then I do the comment when we do the debrief. It's okay. On this he dodged, and this is where maybe a reason why he's dodging. But yeah, I don't see the point of then spending 10 minutes. No, you didn't answer the question. Blah blah blah. Bicycle would be a cool guest. He's on my list. But indeed, I mean, Bicycle has been some time I've been trying to make him come on the channel, and so far you haven't seen him. So we shall see. I have a list of people I would like to see. Then it's a matter of whether they're available and willing to come. But yeah, in any case, tell me if there are people you want to see. Which reminds me, because of course you're not going to do that right now. Do this on Twitter, on Discord, and all that. That's where you can give me your suggestion and have all the rest of the content. And yeah. On this note, all that is left to do this week, we have the news review in English on Friday and in French on Sunday. So on Friday at 5, we're going to discuss the news, and then Sunday in French. And next week, to be confirmed on Monday, look on Twitter, look on Discord, and you will get all the information. And yeah, on this note, I wish you all a good evening, a good end of the week, and I will see you on Friday or at some other time. Bye everyone, have a good one. Ciao.